Hi, I'm Jason Corbett, and I'm a game designer and programmer at a studio here in Philadelphia called PHL Collective, where I've worked on games like Pen 10 Power Trip, Goozy, and the upcoming Addams Family Mansion Mayhem. Buy it, September 24th, pre-order now. We don't have a lot of time, and I have to move fast, and this may get a little bit technical when we dive into the code at the end, but supplemental material will be made available in the following days, so don't worry too much about taking a ton of notes right now. I will talk fast because we've got 5 minutes, and we're going to move. So as you can see on my screen, we're going to be talking about programmatic animation in Unity in a few simple steps. So maybe you just want to move an object a little bit in a game, and you don't want to have to like jump into a modeling program and set up an animation sequence just to make something move in your game. And you don't necessarily need to make a character controller or anything like that. You just want to make it move. So that's where we have the joys of linear interpolation, or LIRP for short. Linear interpolation is a mathematical function that calculates the intermediate steps between two numbers or a set of numbers. What does that actually mean? It means we can, take something from one point to another. What this means in practice is that a LIRP function takes in a start value. So hey, I have a cube here, and it's going. I want to go over here, and it's going to do that over time. So I have set up a simple script that, takes a starting value and a desired end value and just LIRPs it to between them over time. With this, a typical LIRP function, it takes in that start value, the end value, and the quote time value. This does not have to be time, but in today's demos, we're just going to do this over time. And that may sound intimidating to people who aren't math savvy, but the beauty of what we're about to cover means a lot of the complex math is handled for us by the computer. Linear interpolation just moves from 0 to 1 at a flat rate, as you can see here. But this isn't very interesting. But there's a way to make that more interesting, and that's with animation curves. And animation curves are essentially a graph. And like plotting on a graph, they take in one value and output another value. So what we can do is say this, where this is moving on this linear path, like over time, we can say, oh, I want that to actually, adjust over time. So I'm going to slow this down so you can see it a little bit better. So I'm going to take my curve here. And right now you see this has just a flat curve. This is going down here at the lower left. It's going down to, it's starting at 0, going up to a value of 1. If I adjust the handles, and an animation curve consists of a series of these points with weighted control handles. This might be familiar to people who have used graph editors in animation software such as After Effects, Blender, Cinema 4D, animation curves, it's in the name. But you see when I adjust this curve here, and my screen might be stuttering a little bit, not sure if the streaming is going right, but we'll keep on moving on. So it starts off a little bit slower and then moves faster. If I move this a little bit like that, you can see it starts slow, moves fast, and it gets slower as it reaches the end. So there's a little bit of momentum at the beginning, and then it starts to slow it down as it gets to the end. This is what we'd call classically a ease in, ease out graph, but this is more interesting movement than, just plain old move left to right. So got some other demos here. Motion, so that's, you could say, moving from one spot to another, which is represented by just numbers in Unity. That's just like a vector 3. It's just like 0, 0, 0, Here's another example of an easing function. It's moving here. So I've set up an offset in my script. It says like move over, over 3 seconds and move it to the left. I can repeat that. But, you can also have something that goes to 0 and then 1 and then back to 0. And we can create a bouncing effect. With this curve here, I got a bounce. And if we look at that curve, this curve is starting at 0, it goes up to 1, goes back to 0, goes to a number in the middle, which I think is about like 4.6, then back to 0. And then it goes to a little lower number. So it's taking my offset. So it's at the full 1 that's going all the way up to, 5 meters higher, Do it again, and then it's going a little bit lower, a little bit lower. So rather than being like, oh, I have to calculate exactly like the physics or whatever, I can just say like, I want it to bounce like visually, just how it, you know, is plotted here. So I think using curves like this make relatively complex tasks seem a lot easier to handle. You can also have values that go below 1 or above 1, and kind of the computer will, you know, adjust accordingly. And I'm over my time already. So you can have something that pings pongs back and forth. And we're going to wrap this up real quick. We got sprite demos. You can do the same thing with colors, you know, because what's a color? It's just numbers, you know, colors, you know, red, green, blue, they can just be represented as numbers. So we can have flashing effects. We can adjust the alpha, which is the transparency of a sprite, by changing the color of those. So I've set, instead of numbers here, I'm using the inspectors, you know, color picker. And I've just set this alpha to 0. So I can have a fading effect. I can do a highlighting effect. Move for time, we're running out of time real quick. What's all other things that are a number? I mean, anything in Unity is kind of a number, but we got lights. Intensity is a number. So I can have lights that fade in and out on a curve, just going up to my full intensity, back down to my lower intensity. I can go even further with more organic kind of curves that do all kinds of weird wibbly wobbly stuff, and you get kind of this effect over here, which looks kind of reminiscent of fire. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways you can use curves in creative ways, you know, beyond just, you know, from point A to point B. You know, I have a lot of weird curves saved here that do all kinds of, you know, funky things for platforms that move, or, you know, other stuff like that. Real quick, I'll show some under the hood code stuff, but I'm over time. But real quick, these are things that I've serialized in the inspector so that you can mess with them on the fly, like, you know, the curve itself, you know, some demo keys and stuff like that. But mainly what I'm caring about is I have a timer, you know, my start position, my end position, and once I start, the timer just going up from 0 to 1, which I achieve by, you know, dividing time by a duration, and it kind of this makes it easier to handle here. And here I'm using these lerp functions, and each kind of value in Unity has their own kind of lerp function. Like vector3 has a lerp. There's just a basic math function, which I'm using for the light intensity. And I'll share this code later, but there's some of these comments and stuff like that. And I think I'm way over time, but there's a lot to cover here in, you know, 5 minutes, but I guess I'll take questions.
Yeah, that was cool. I don't have a question at the moment. With Q&A,
If there are questions or comments,
I will
probably just like, my mind's blown.
No, I see the use of this, because there's a couple of games that I've wanted to make where I was like, this tool would be very, very handy, just to be able to like do motion and things over curves, as opposed to the math. So
it definitely helps when you if it's something where you know where you're starting from and where you're going, you can decide how you're getting there, you know, in any fashion. Yeah.
I definitely look forward to the added supplementary material and the links that will be available on the IGDA Philly YouTube later. Do we have any questions? Rob says that you won so far for doing a live demo in Engine.
It's because I'm just too lazy to make slides or videos.
Oh, we do. Okay, so Micah asks, "What's your favorite use of curves in a game?"
They do feel very clever. I did the the light, the fire thing kind of, I did that kind of thing in Atoms, September 24th. Buy it, pre-order now. There's, I felt good about adding that. I would, say that these kind of material, these effects aren't for everybody. They don't always work. Like dynamic lighting can be expensive if in certain situations, it worked for Atoms. Sometimes like this color stuff, changing colors might be better with a shader, but if you're just trying to like prototype something and get something stood up quickly, maybe you can refine it later, but I think it's a really great way to be like, get something working.
Definitely.
And maybe it'll go into production. Who knows?
On that note, Rob asks, how would you make the curves more organic or random?
I think random. Oh, I did put this. I lost my curve.
Noise
at runtime. That gets into more of something like Perlin noise, where you can have programmatically adjusting noise, and that's something you could do with something like a light effect like this. Pretty, but then you have to set up noise and stuff like that, which is not like that's. There are functions that or scripts available on the internet that can do Perlin noise. And that's probably the best way to make something that looks random but organic like this with parameters like this. So this is merely a simulation of that. Even though I've actually added to my curve, it's looking kind of funky. So Perlin noise would be my answer. But that's beyond the scope of this. Or just making random, keys and being like, hey, key, and then flat, and then just like what I did, which was make random.
Right. A good question from Tom. Is the math behind the lerp functions expensive? Could performance suffer for overusing?
I think depending on how much you're doing it, I don't think it's that expensive just for simple, like math functions. If you're doing a lot of these functions at the same time, you're moving a lot of like vector 3. We're gonna even cover like rotation because that can be, quaternions and stuff like that. But I don't think it's that expensive by itself. But if you're doing a lot of it, it could get expensive. And if you're moving a lot of transforms in Unity in general, that can be, a lot. But that's just, the general overhead with Unity itself. You got a lot of stuff in your scene, it might suffer, whether you're moving it or not.